Hey everybody, welcome to the daily space weather today, and indeed there is some space weather headed our way. We'll talk about it. And welcome, by the way, to the Smash News Network least busted name in news. So we had a CME that we covered yesterday. We were covering it right as it happened, and there appears to be an Earth-facing component. It'll be a minor strike according to most estimates. And also a coronal hole high-speed stream expected. We also have a seismic uptick, a new sunspot rising, and lots more to cover. So yeah, there's that CME we're talking about. That's about the last 24 hours of coronagraph imagery and 304 angstroms. Most of that CME is expected to miss the Earth to the west. We'll show you more in-depth analysis of that momentarily. First, the colorized magnetogram. Again, we do have a new little tiny sunspot right here. We'll see if that one has umbra long enough to get a name. There's been a little bit of degradation here with sunspots over the last 24. We still saw an increase in the radial flux. We'll get to it. By the way, if you want to support the channel via merch, check out the links below the video. You can find our merch on the link. It is sorted in order of a best-selling. Not surprising what the best seller is. Today's featured product is being worn by me, Mensa, Make Earth Not Suck Again. And fun fact about this design right here is that somebody tried to steal it. They were, for some reason, selling our product, the exact same design, advertising our website, smashomash.org, and their whole entire Redbubble shop got taken down. So please don't steal our designs. That's an unfortunate thing. And the point of it is that it's up to you to make Earth not suck again. It's a message of personal responsibility. Now, while our finest days lie ahead, you may have noticed the last 2.5 years have kind of sucked. And let us know in the comments if you have certain people that you wish would be held accountable for their terrible decision making. We know we certainly do. And of course, you may follow us on Twitter to find out more about that. But in any case, it's up to you to make Earth not suck again. Do your part. Start a conversation. Pick up some controversial merch. Oh my God. Make Earth not suck again. As if it's any controversy to divulge or not divulge personal medical information. Protected health information, yes. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. If you don't have an account, go create an account on Twitter. You'll see retweets, you'll see no place else, as well as a bunch of limericks being written. And if your only mission is to press like, subscribe, share, comment, etc. on YouTube, if that's all you're able to do to help support the channel, well, we appreciate that too. Thanks to everybody who tuned in on the video on YouTube. Thanks to our Gold and Silver Smash team members. You want to support the channel via subscription services, please do that via smashomash.com/smashteam. You can also use the Patreon link. You can find links on the homepage as well as below the video to our homepage, smashomash.com. And welcome to the Neo Renaissance. Again, all kinds of links to social media over there. Get involved, links to the Redbubble shop, and so forth. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting the channel. One last thing, you want to support your health, become a member of the American Better Health Organization, otherwise known as SureMed. And if you do the Premier membership, you get accident insurance, critical illness insurance, as well as all the other features of the base membership. Even virtual veterinarians are included nowadays, and yes, they'll even help you out with your fish. SureMed, again, links below the video and on the homepage. Let's check what volcanoes have been erupting over the past 24 hours here on volcanoestoday.com. And Shivaluch, producing some effusive activity there. You can see some lava cascading down the upper portions of the lava cone there at Shivaluch. A viscous lava dome showing up and some glowing flows. Not sure on if there's an ash plume or not, but Shivaluch remains on the list. Sakurajima producing a 9,000-foot ash plume, Suwanosejima. Unknown volcanic ash plume size, please don't pull Volta Caldera. Kilauea showing up here on the list. From available HVO monitoring deformation data, the ground has been fluctuating, periods of uplift and subsidence over the past week, varying between values of 1, inflation, and -2, deflation. So some activity there on the Big Isle of Hawaii. It's Kilauea. Sangay headed down to Ecuador. Sangay exploding, flight level 230. I think that's an uptick at Sangay. 23,000-foot ash plume. Ecuador, 15,000-foot ash plume as Ecuador explodes. Incandescent emissions from the crater can be seen in satellite imagery. And headed farther south to Sabancaya in Peru, exploding. Continuous ash emissions and a 24,000-foot ash plume mean a flight level 240. And seismic uptick continues here at even greater levels than yesterday. Remember, folks, we want you to be an asset, not a liability in the event of a disaster. Have a bug-out bag. Have a plan. Know which buildings might collapse should you have to evacuate yours. Don't have the neighboring building fall on you. And thanks for leaving a comment, TinMan1057. Good morning to you as well. So yeah, we had 2 6+ magnitude quakes. One of them was this 6.6 here in between New Zealand and the Kermadec Islands and Tonga. In the Kermadec Trench, that was a 6.6 that happened at 13:44 Universal Time yesterday. There was also a 6.1 that happened here east of New Caledonia. So that's the most seismically active portion of the planet, Oceania, the area north of New Zealand. That 6.1 happened at 21:04 yesterday evening. That is Universal Time, by the way. And we'll scroll up the list here. Again, 2 significant quakes there over 6 magnitude. Also a 5.2 in the Aleutians. So mostly the Ring of Fire there, the area around the Pacific Ocean, the usual suspect for seismic activity. Let us know if we missed anything here on the list. And thanks to everybody who's been leaving comments over the past few days. We did see a China quake here, also a China quake, as we did show prep, a quake from China. That quake made in China, okay? China. Now, sunspots. They've been mostly stable. There has been a little bit of degradation, it looks like. A new small sunspot rising over here. We'll show you high-resolution imagery of that toward the end of the video. Again, a CME headed this way, as well as a coronal hole high-speed stream, expected to arrive on the 17th. So Wednesday, late in the day on the 17th, expecting a CME and a coronal hole strike. We'll see what happens. Here's some great imagery from the SDO. You can see that CME propagating down here in the lower right. And here's some imagery from the Soho-Lascaux C2 and C3, as well as 304 angstroms. It's actually 2 separate events happening there. One will miss the Earth entirely to the south and east. The other one will likely have what we'd call a glancing blow, not a direct hit. And once again, welcome to the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. We only cover the most detailed space weather and the most comprehensive imagery of the sun that you'll find any place on the internet. Radio flux now at 126 solar flux units. And there's the 1-year chart of the radio flux, represented by the black line. The red line below it is the sunspot number. So here you go, NOAA forecasting a CME and a coronal hole high-speed wind strike here on Wednesday, August 17th. Expecting a G1 geomagnetic storm. KP5 expected. as well as some preceding and following geomagnetic unrest periods. Let's take a look at the current earthly geospace. It's Earth's magnetic moment from space for the last 4 hours. And things are pretty calm. So when we see the arrival of the coronal hole high-speed stream and or coronal mass ejection, we can expect a significant signal showing up in various aspects of the data like the solar wind, geomagnetic calm at the moment. We showed you Earth's magnetic moment from space. Here's Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. Again, we've got calm conditions expected for the next couple of days, and then some solar fireworks, some aurorae. Expect some great retweets on the Twitter account. And thanks to everybody who's interacted on Twitter. Again, that's the last 4 hours. Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. KP2 is the current situation. The planetary K index for you new viewers is a measurement of global geomagnetism. The solar wind here continues to subside largely over the past 24. Current solar wind density here lower than it was yesterday, down to about 4.25 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind velocity 445 kilometers per second. And let's get into some magnetic data. There's the GOES magnetometers. There are the GOES magnetometers, the GOES 16 and GOES 17's measurements from their geosynchronous near equatorial orbit. If you're wondering where they're located, keep in mind, folks, these measurements are taken from Lagrange point 1, about 1 million miles away from Earth. These are taken from a geosynchronous orbit at about 11,000 miles of altitude. Next, looking at the polarity of the heliospheric current sheet. It's our top view ecliptic plane field plot. And Earth remains in a south pole current sheet. No changes expected to that anytime soon. Here's our line of sight plot. And I would remind you that the north solar polar migration is well behind the south. And let's take a look at coronal holes, since there's a lot of information to go over and a lot of activity remaining in solar cycle 25. Notice how there is no south pole magnetism down here at the south heliographic pole. That is because the south solar polar field migration is ahead of the north. The north, you do see indeed a rather north polar located coronal hole up there. So the north polar migration behind the south. And let's take a look at this from SDO's perspective. 193 is a great wavelength, 193 angstroms ionized iron. You'll also see this CME happening down here in the lower right. And we'll also look at this in 211 angstroms, where that coronal hole's even more well defined. Once again, that is a south pole oriented coronal hole system. And we're expecting a high-speed wind from that on Wednesday, August 17th. Next, moving to sunspots, which have again largely been stable here over the past 24 hours. This group up here needs a name. That should be known as 3082. Not sure why that's not named yet. It should get a name today. Again, there's one small, little tiny group here rising in the southeast. We'll show you some high-res imagery of that. Here's the last 24 of SDO continuum. And let's zoom in. Again, sunspots mostly stable here over the past 24 hours. A small increase in the radio flux. And here's the SDO magnetogram. I say the most interesting region is Sunspot 3082. Let us know in the comments what you think. So here's the X-ray profile over the past 3 days. Some C-class intensifications there. Don't be surprised to see an M-class flare. It's entirely possible. A great wavelength to view flares is 131 angstroms. And that coronal mass ejection was associated with a C-class flare. You'll see a lot of activity there in the western hemisphere, both in the north and the south. And we did see a minor increase in the proton flux there, very minor. A little bit of relativistic particles showing up. Nothing particularly noteworthy happening there in terms of proton events. Here's our star chart. We always like to show this daily to keep our viewers oriented. Interestingly enough, astronomy looking more like astrology as time goes on, with the onset of things like cosmic rays. It's getting pretty weird, folks. It's getting pretty weird. And it's an exciting time to be studying these subjects. And if you're up before dawn, you might see a planetary pileup consisting of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. Jupiter and the Moon quite close to each other in the sky at the moment. That is the current sky over Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. And next we'll do a solar system forecast as we do daily on the space weather. Folks are interested in what planets are where. Great views of Saturn, by the way. If you've got a backyard telescope, now's a great time to view Saturn. Great shadow rings happening on Saturn at the moment. Earth is fairly close to that gas giant, relatively speaking. It's on the same side of the solar system. Anyway, here's your 1 week forecast. We will have a crescent waning as we approach new moon. Next, some coronagraph imagery, and this is largely showing the CME well off to the west. And it may be a little bit deceptive because, again, there were 2 different CME events happening there. So you can see one heads off to the south and east, and the other one mostly to the west. Maybe it'll miss entirely, and maybe the coronal hole high-speed stream will mask it. But in any case, that was yesterday. Here's today's coronagraphs. And let's show some more coronagraph imagery here as we paused. The view from stereo A, that's at Lagrange 5, out here, trailing the Earth orbitally speaking, seeing space weather ahead of the Earth, hence the name stereo A for ahead. And on the right, you've got the Soho-Lasco C3 here at Lagrange 1. And we paused this here at 1553 for stereo A and 1542 for the Soho-Lasco C3. And you can see that L-shaped coronal mass ejection. I think we may see the strike a little bit earlier than NOAA is forecasting. Now, you know what? Scratch that. Late in the day on the 17th does seem to be correct. Late in the day on Wednesday, August 17th is when we should expect to see that. It looks like a normal speed CME to me. And there you can see some ejecta kind of all around the coronagraph. A little bit up here on the top. And so the Earth is moving toward that as it orbits the sun. And so, yeah, we're expecting a minor CME strike. And again, there will be a coronal hole high-speed stream showing up around that same time. So we could see a little bit of irregularities in the signal. Things like the solar wind density and speed. Stereo A giving us additional perspective on the orientation of that. Now, NOAA is expecting this CME to hit stereo B late in the day on the 18th, actually. And you can see it's not really expected to strike Earth there on the NOAA Enlil forecast. Now let's take a look at filaments. As we've got a lot of filaments, likelihood of coronal mass ejections still very high. Ton of filaments there in both hemispheres. So don't be surprised to see additional CMEs, coronal mass ejections. And don't get them confused, folks. Solar flares are photons. Coronal mass ejections are protons. One is light in the form of X-rays, and one is gas. Protons and photons, they're very different in terms of their mass. And that was a poem that I did not intentionally write. So here's the last few hours from the GOES 16 SUVI, and we've got some activity from this active region down here. Looks like another CME could be propagating as we stream the video. Here's the last 24 and 304 angstroms, and there should be some great imagery there of that CME happening in the lower right. Great imagery there from the high resolution, narrow field of view of the SDO. Next, we're moving into bonus features here, like our Satellites Community Dashboard. We've got major charging hazards here once again. As the electron storm subsides, we're getting high energy electrons still ending up inside of some satellites. Internal charging hazards here over a large portion of the planet, and some significant ones, especially in the southern Indian Ocean. They may cause some communications failures. It's not the Borg, it's not Putin, and it's not China. It's relativistic electrons. So here are the relativistic electrons measured by the GOES 16 and GOES 17 using radiography from their geosynchronous orbits. And again, we are seeing a bit of a subsiding here of the electron storm. You can see over the last week very high levels of electron flux now coming down. And we can expect that to be cratered by Wednesday when the coronal hole high-speed stream arrives. So these, I'm expecting these to be way down here when the next coronal hole high-speed stream arrives. But for today's measurement, no one nailed it. The yellow diamond is the forecast. Here's the one-year chart. You can find that yourself if you like at solon.info. And let's take a look at the F ionosphere layer, the bridge between Earth and space. So that's the vibrational frequency at about 300 kilometers of altitude. The location of the F ionosphere layer. And of course that altitude does vary a bit. We'll also show the anomaly gram. Here's the anomaly gram, anomaly in megahertz from the 30-day median. By the way, this data is from the Australian Government Bureau Meteorology. And we've got the most geomagnetically active month coming. Here's the latest ionogram and anomalygram. The most geomagnetically active month is indeed September. Let's take a look at the total electron content as well, which is effectively the free electrons in between your GPS satellite and your handset. That's about 12,500 miles of altitude between your GPS satellite and your handset. And this is the free electrons in that space. Two plasmaspheres, the inner Van Allen belt, and the ionosphere, the coupled thermosphere, ionosphere, plasmasphere electrodynamics. And those electrons remaining fairly organized here. For the past day, GPS errors expected around the equator at noon, as they typically are. So here's our latest intensitygram and colorized magnetogram. Again, we have a new sunspot rising down here. It's barely a sunspot, but it looks like it's grown since we did show prep. I think it's already beta gamma class. And there's the rest of the solar disk. It looks like many of these sunspots here are degrading over the past 24 hours. But this new group over here does appear to be increasing in size and complexity. Let's bring up one more composite series of images. This is 211, 304, and 171 angstroms. That should be the data from yesterday and today. And no, the sun is not wiggling back and forth like that. That's some kind of problem with the data. And let's move on to our meteorology segment. Yes, it's a value-added service. And thanks for leaving a comment, Smasho staff. Here at the Smash News Network, least busted name of news, we do meteorology because, well, it's a skill that I picked up decades ago as a result of being a pro cyclist. And I realized that it's too easy to forecast the weather, so that prompted me to eventually move into the realm of space weather. Here are the surface winds of the eastern world. And here are the jet streams. Next, jet streams of the Americas. Very cold air being injected into the eastern portion of the U.S. Some cold air from eastern Canada and the Great Lakes region, showing up as far south as, well, looks like even into Florida. Surface winds of the Americas, looking like this. Surface winds of the central world. And here are the jet streams. And shout out to our viewers from all around the planet. Congratulations on realizing the channel exists. Thanks a lot for all the help, Big Tech. You're doing a fine job, a fine job. Here's your weather.gov map and a bunch of gale warnings there around Alaska. Excessive heat in places like Washington and California, land of the fruits and nuts. And some flood watches there in places like Virginia, West Virginia, southern Texas, Colorado, parts of New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. If your county's lit, head to weather.gov and click your county. Some gale watches there around the East Coast as well. Here's your pressure and precipitation forecast based on the GFS model for the next 72 hours. Yes. And here is your temperature anomaly forecast. Again, very cold times in Pennsylvania. Very, very cold times in places like Arkansas, Missouri. Again, that's your GFS temperature anomaly forecast. It is showing degrees Celsius. And it's the next 72 hours. Very hot weather in the northwest. Very cold weather in the central and southern. Basically every place east of the Rockies. Mostly cold temperature anomalies showing up there. Next, your pressure maps. And I think the lowest pressure in the world is in the Southern Ocean here. South of the Pacific. Low pressure dominating large portions of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Also a strong low pressure here in the Northern Pacific. Mixed pressures across the U.S. Here's your NASA GOES lightning mapper. And by the way, if you're not aware, we do regularly stream live to Twitch, twitch.tv/smashaMash. There's a great mobile app. It'll actually alert you when we go live, unlike certain live streaming applications. Twitch. The totally sweet thing about Twitch is that the technology is not 20 years behind. It's not obsolete, like certain busted software that you may find on the internet. So we did have some active lightning here when we did show prep. It looks like it's calmed down. Nope, still some lightning here south of Mobile in the Gulf. Also some active cells there in southern Texas. Only minor lightning at the moment. There's the available data from lightningmaps.org. And we've got even more meteorology information for you here. How about the U.S. Doppler radar map? I swear to God, it's going to work. Dear God. Please load. Please load. I can assure you that there is some weather in the U.S. So let's just move on to the shortwave radiation map. There you go. There's clouds and fog. Interesting looking system there in southern Texas. And here is the water vapor to clarify that. And you've got a bunch of dry massive air here constraining this moisture, which is a low pressure system relatively speaking. Also a low pressure here over the South Dakota-Nebraska border. And cold air rushing down here, pushing some moisture out to sea off the coast of North Carolina throughout the day today. Here's your recap. And there's the U.S. Doppler radar map. I don't know why it's not animated. If you want to check it out yourself, it's radar.weather.gov. Of course, everybody knows that government websites tend to be very functional, and this channel completely lacks sarcasm. Here's the rest of your recap. Clouds and fog in the form of 3.9 nanometer infrared radiation. It's from a satellite. And yes, you can see curvature. And here is the water vapor map. Thanks for tuning in to the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. We're delighted to bring you another daily space weather video, and may that solar wind be at your back.